if you are a sales leader, if you are a founder, this is really a call for you to enable and to empower your team to be able to embrace this CEO of territory mindset. So I'm seeing folks drop some titles in the chat right away. So a little bit of everything I'm seeing so far, which is great because this is going to be applicable whether or not you are actually doing the sales, you're leading the team, you're building the motion. So we're going to talk about CEO of territory mindset, and then we're going to get tactical because I know y'all love to walk away with tips and techniques that you can implement, that you can start using immediately. So I am going to share 3 of my favorite segmentation strategies that are going to help you take that more strategic approach to your territory. And then the final item is relevance equals revenue. Like I hinted, what I'm ultimately going to try to leave you with is an idea of how to personalize at scale. I call those micro campaigns in my book and the work I do with my clients, but the core concept is around relevance. You will hear me say that word so many times today. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's worth it if I drive the point home. What I'd love for you all to leave with today, the goal of our time together, is for you to leave behind some of that feeling, the anxiety, where you just feel like you're kind of chasing prospects, where you're not getting the engagement, where you're not getting the conversions that you want with your territory approach, and instead pivot you to a strategy, to an opportunity to build repeatable processes that, why am I not sharing anymore? To build repeatable processes that allow you to start building that profit generating pipeline. Amazing. So a quick story that I want to share to give you a bit of context before we jump into some of these strategies. My very first sales job, I was in a super transactional environment, and we did not have a territory. And when I say we didn't have a territory, I mean it's not that we didn't have a set of accounts that we were given. We literally didn't have a territory. We weren't assigned to a geo. We weren't assigned to a specific industry. We could call anybody in the entire nation and parts of Canada. And the way that we would save an account, because it was a transactional environment, is we would literally write it on a sheet of paper, write the company name on a sheet of paper, and then we had 3 days to close the account or lose it and move on. So you can imagine when I am told in my first sales job ever that I can call anybody I want to, that felt really overwhelming. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt overwhelming. And I came to the conclusion quite quickly that I needed to start developing my own way of approaching the territory, the national territory, of deciding who I was going to reach out to, why now was the right time to reach out to them, what got me excited about talking to them, or perhaps what I thought was most relevant to them. So a lot of the basis of what I'm going to teach you now, I started developing in that very first sales job. And one of the ways that I saw it come to life that had the biggest impact in my sales career was the last job that I had before I left corporate. I was hired by a British company, a business intelligence, a platform as a service company, to be their first sales hire in the US. So I was owning GTM for this organization, given the privilege of penetrating the US market for a brand that was pretty darn well established in the European market already. So pros and cons to that. The pros were that I had a lot of historical data to work from. I had some of the social proof of their existing clients. I knew who was buying in the European market. And the result was that when I looked at my US territory, the accounts had already been tiered for me, A through F, based on the success that they'd had in the European market. I started that job in August. I called those tier A accounts, the ones that they'd been winning in Europe, which was pharma and CPG, consumer packaged goods. And folks, I was struggling. And it was a pretty high stakes job. I was on the phone, I was doing the selling directly before I hired the team to get some of the motion under me. And it was a struggle. Things were not moving as quickly or as well as I'd hoped to. And so I took a chance And I started ignoring my tier A accounts. Instead, I focused on my tier C accounts because that's where folks in financial services existed. And I knew from previous jobs that I sold well to that industry. I understood that industry. We have a similar communication style. So I started building sequences for it's like CPOs based at financial service orgs in New York, and things started moving along to the extent that when I pitched my territory plan, my GTM strategy in January for the following year, I pitched to focus predominantly on financial services and related orgs. And the result was that we went from sort of struggling and barely eking out these conversations to bringing in over $1 million in net new revenue in our first year penetrating this new market. So I share that story with you both to encourage you to have that type of CEO mindset where you are not just looking at your territory and dialing down a list of accounts, but that you are really asking yourself questions like, who am I going to get the best results from, even if it might not be obvious at that surface level? And where do I think I'm going to be able to penetrate quickly to move most quickly? So that was the $1 million pivot. And we're going to dig into some of the tactical ways that you can bring that to life. Like I mentioned, you can find all of this in my book. So if you want to get a copy of the book, shameless plug, there's the QR code. Take a picture of it, and you can snag the full 9-step proven pipeline formula that I go through, because what we're going to dig into today is really only one step. We're going to dig into so many formatting errors here. We're going to dig into really these first 3 circles that you're seeing, identifying the ICP so that we can match value props to them with the goal of building micro campaigns. So you're getting a little bit of a flavor of those first 3. I custom built this deck for Revolt because I am such a big fan of the type of content being shared here and what the community at RevGenius. So I'm giving you a little behind the scenes, little flavor of all 3 of those. So one of the things I see when I am working with corporate sales organizations is a bit of a broken mindset. And folks, head to the chat and tell me if you've ever felt this way, because I will be the first to admit that sometimes I feel this urge that I need to reach everybody who could ever potentially buy from me, and somehow I needed to do it yesterday. Has anybody ever felt that urge, that drive where you feel like you need to reach every single person in your territory, maybe every single person in your total addressable market, and then you need to do it immediately? Yes, I've seen some comments that I totally agree with. All the pipeline right now. We are not alone. I don't even necessarily think it's a bad thing that we're like excited to talk to people and we're eager to penetrate our territory. But part of adopting that CEO of territory mindset is understanding that there is an element of needing to slow down in order to speed up. And what I call this mindset of feeling like we need to talk to everybody immediately is the boil the ocean approach. Yeah, I'm seeing some other great comments. We all want to move fast. Yeah, move fast and break things. And we've heard that again and again and again for years. Of course, it's like stuck in our brains now. What I want to share with you, though, is you do not need to boil the ocean. And I'd even go a step further to say, if you are trying to boil the ocean, if you are trying to reach everybody, you're gonna fail. That's not strategy. More is not a strategy. So what I often see is that when we think about territory management, we are asking ourselves questions like, how can I reach out to every single person who could possibly buy from me, which is our TAM, our total addressable market. And maybe folks are getting a little bit more niche down. They're saying, how can I reach out to my SAM, my sales addressable market? So those are at least the people that like you realistically could maybe sell to right now. Only the best organizations, those at the top, are going all the way down to their SOM, their sales obtainable market. And those are your best fit accounts. Those are really the only accounts that you should see in your territory, like in your CRM. I know that's not realistic. I've seen some of these territories, they're wiling out, but the ideal situation is the only accounts that you would see in your territory, in your CRM, are those sales obtainable market, those best fit accounts. But my suggestion is that we need to go even one step further. I think something that often holds us back in this, like adopting the CEO of territory mindset from a sales perspective, is that we often hear marketing language around ICP, or ideal customer profile, ideal customer persona. And we think of our ICP as being a static thing. It's like one group. And what I have found as a sales practitioner is that we have within our territory multiple ICPs, because they are ideal for reasons that are unique to them, for reasons that are relevant to them, the buyer, not necessarily to us, the seller. So are we sort of getting this idea of kind of pivoting to the CEO of territory mindset, taking a more strategic, maybe more creative approach to penetrating our territory, because we want to get away from this feeling that we always have inside to like move fast, break things, reach out to everybody. Because at the end of the day, folks, if we are trying to talk to everybody, we're talking to nobody. Who's heard this cliche before? If you're trying to speak to everybody, you're reaching nobody, you're talking to nobody. And I think what happens often is that we are fed a narrative that we either need to take a quantity approach, and because we know for most of us, unless you're selling like in a super high ticket price or you have a really, really small TAM, most of us can't take this quality approach where we're spending like 2 hours researching every account before we even start our outreach. Like that's just not feasible for the average sales cycle. And so instead, we pivot more to this quantity approach, which, folks, that's spam. If we are sending high volume, generic, like seller centric, irrelevant outreach to our prospects, we're calling it selling, but what we're really doing is spamming them. So we're leaving all of that in the past. And what we are going to do instead is practice some segmentation. So this was supposed to be a quiz, but the whole slide came up at once. But I guess if anybody wants to guess, you still can. How many accounts can an SDR work at once? So the answer is 40 to 205. 205 is like that top threshold for like very transactional sales environments, and 40 is going to be more for those folks that are doing like a key account or an ABM type of approach. I'd love to hear from anybody. Like how many accounts do you think that you are working, that you like actively have in sequences at any given time? And is it higher or lower than 205? Because 205 is that top threshold if you have like a really transactional sales environment. And I would guess, I'll wait to see if anybody is willing to be a bit vulnerable, a bit honest about how many accounts they guess they're working at any given time. But I would guess that most of you are probably over 200. And the sweet spot for most of the folks on this call is going to be closer to 100 accounts. And so the goal when you are working those 100 accounts is to figure out, okay, if I can only do great sales outreach to about 100 accounts at a time, how do I figure out within my territory where I can win today? Of those, hundreds of accounts, if I have to pick 100, where are my best opportunities? Where are my best fit accounts? And and there are 3 segmentation techniques that I am going to share with you so that you can apply that CEO of territory mindset and start more strategically managing your territory. Okay, so the first one is, we're going to dig into all of these in detail, so don't worry. The first one is personal passion. So asking yourself questions like, what do I get excited about? So it is easier for you to get excited about doing the research and doing the outreach. CRM data. So that's kind of like the story I shared at the beginning of our time together, where the CRM data told me I would win with pharma and CPG. It ended up not being true for me in a new market, but for my counterparts in the European market, they were able to look at those industries and realize that that's where they were most likely to win and win today. And firmographic data. So those are the most easily accessible filters in things like, your CRM, sales nav, etc. So we're going to go through each of those. And I'd love to hear if there's one that particularly resonates with you, or maybe there's even a different set of, filtering or a different approach to territory management that you've been taking that works really well and you'd love to share with the other folks on this session. So the first one, personal passion. When I was in that very first sales role straight out of college and I was allowed to call anybody in the entire nation and parts of Canada, this is the one I gravitated to at first. I thought, if I can call anybody, then why don't I pick people to call that are working on things that I find most exciting? And so I tried a couple of different types of campaigns. I did like a sustainability one. I did one that was like a couple different ones that were just focused on women that were in C-suite positions. And so I figured out how to make it extra exciting to me. So I have some examples here. But I'd love to hear your ideas. If you were going to build a personal passion campaign, what's something that you get most excited about that you could use as a way to segment your territory into a smaller list? So maybe you're saying, I love mechanics. So you could start by building lists in the automotive industry. Like I shared, one of the ways that I started is that I am passionate about sustainability. So you could find maybe organizations that have a sustainability pledge or that have won a sustainability award and build a list based on that. Or you can steal the one that worked for me when I was penetrating the financial services market in the Northeast. And that was based on my communication style. I know that I prefer a very direct, sometimes like almost curt communication style. And those folks in the Northeast working at financial services firms brought that. So just that simple overlap made it more likely that I would get their attention, earn a conversation, be able to close them. So yeah, seeing some great stuff in the chat here. So keep it coming. So personal passion is the first segmentation filter that I offer you. The second one is CRM data. So I'm hoping that people are already sort of using their CRM data to drive some of their deals forward. But a couple of questions here that you could be asking yourselves: what industries are closing fastest, or which close at the highest price points, maybe which close without negotiating so that you have the best profit margin. Maybe you are working for a startup and you're asking yourself, which industry, if I can close a big logo in it, would be like a watershed moment because I would have the social proof to more deeply penetrate the industry. Maybe you're asking, where am I most likely to close somebody that will give me a testimonial or give me referrals? Maybe you're looking a little bit more at demographic info, like what job title when I reach out to has the shortest sales cycle or has the highest, conversion rate from demo to opportunity. So I'd love to hear from folks in the chat. Are there any other questions that they ask using their CRM data to understand where they're winning or where the organization more broadly is winning so that they can then take that information and use it to further segment their territory and build lists? So let's see what people are saying over here. The Ray Allen model, I don't know what that is, Patrick. Give us some more details here. Charlie says much lower than 200, which I love to hear this. And I'm seeing 125. That's great. You too. I'm seeing that maybe nobody wanted to be honest that their their sales leader has given them like 600 accounts to work. And then Morgan said, I love CTOs whose CFOs are making their lives miserable about their cloud computing. Okay, but Morgan, I know that you're being funny, but this is a great example of understanding how to make it about them. You're not talking about your product. You're talking about the emotions that your buyer is feeling. You're talking about the problems that they're facing. So hilarious, but also a really spot on example. And then let's see, Andy said for CRM data, a question that he can ask to figure out where they're already winning, where they might win in the future is what themes or questions are account managers handling with existing clients that can help inform sales messaging. That's great. That actually connects a few dots, Andy. So at the earlier in our time together, I showed that 9-step proven formula. And if we think about how to stack together, building a really tight list, because we have figured out what makes the folks on that list ideal so that we can write sales messaging that matters to them, which then allows us to tap into some of this personalization at scale. We can build these micro campaigns. You're kind of stacking all of those ideas together in this answer. So I love that, Andy. Great example. Okay, so we have talked about personal passion. We have talked about asking yourself, where are we already winning so that we can win faster and more there using CRM data. And then the last segmentation technique that I would love to offer you is firmographics. These are the most easy to leverage filters within your CRM. That's why I always suggest that folks start there with building their segmentation. The hack that I absolutely swear by is to use a minimum of 5 filters when you are building your lists. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of filters as well as what it might look like stacked together. So the reason that I suggest, and I gave some examples here, but the reason that I suggest a minimum of 5 filters is that I found that if you don't use at least 5 filters to take from SOM, that sales obtainable market, everybody, that you could reach out to as a quote unquote best fit account, and get way more niched down, it is almost impossible to put yourself in a position to say, okay, what do I think that the CFO of somebody in this specific revenue range, employee account, geo industry is thinking about the most right now? And if you're not able to ask that really specific question, like to Andy's example, if you can't be super specific about what that exact person in that exact niche set of firmographics cares about, it's really difficult to write relevant messaging. And then we find ourselves back at that like boil the ocean, spray the prey mindset that we are leaving behind because we are CEOs of our territory today. So let me give you a couple of examples, folks. So here are some examples of all the filters. I call them value-based segmentation filters because they're filters that I'm using to get to the value that the prospect would get from me. So you can see the firmographic examples there. If you're new to territory management and new to building lists like this, start with firmographics. If you're ready to go next level, you can add in maybe some of these like psychographic or even more demographic filters. So the world's your oyster. I wanted to give you all of that information. And the goal, like I was saying, is for your prospects, when you are building these niche lists so that you can really understand what matters to them, so that your outreach is hyper targeted on what's most relevant to them, is that they're more likely to pay attention because it is relevant. The benefit to you is that you start tapping into some of that personalization at scale. You start tapping into some of that repeatability because you have built a list that is specific enough that you can research one time, get a really good handle on what's most important for that person in that type of account based on those filters that you used. And then you can write hyper relevant sales messaging and start running it with higher success rates, but more automation. So it ends up even though it's a little slower in the beginning, right? We kind of have to slow down so we can speed up later. It ends up saving a tremendous amount of time on the back end because you're able to tap into some of that repeatability and automation while still maintaining a very, very high conversion rate because you have indexed on relevance. So, one other note I feel like I have to take a moment to talk about when it comes to building these lists, deciding who you're going to reach out to, is signal-based selling. So I think signal-based selling is more accessible than it ever has been before. And drop a like a thumbs up in the chat or like a yes in the chat if you are already doing some sort of signal-based selling right now. I would assume that probably at least half of the group is. Yeah, lots of thumbs up. Yeah, love that. Love to hear that. So signal-based selling is not new, even though sometimes folks would have you believe signal-based selling. Like before it was signal-based selling, it was called intent data. Before it was intent data, it was called triggers. Like I literally in that very first sales job where I was figuring out how to manage this huge national territory would use Google alerts to surface triggers. And I didn't come up with that strategy myself. Like folks were doing this way before me. Here's how I see folks misuse signals. And so I feel some frustration often from people that are like, I am personalizing. I am using signals and I'm still not getting the conversion rates. Is that if your signals aren't relevant and aren't delivering value to the recipient of the message, then it's a waste of a signal. So if you are not using your signal, and I'm going to give you an example of what this might look like in a second, but if you are not using your signal to first ask yourself questions like, hey, what does this signal tell me about my prospect? It means you're probably just reading the news to them. And like, help me out here, folks, in the chat, because what are some of the cringiest signals that you see being used in sales messaging? I got us started with one. I see you're the founder at the sales-led go-to-market agency. Like, yeah, I know it's like literally my job title that I gave myself at my company that I started. So it just sort of feels like people are kind of being a bit lazy. And there's a couple signal-based ones that come up over and over and over again. So I'd love to see if people are thinking of the same ones as me. Drop them in the chat. But the two that I see most often that just they make me feel so sad for the sellers and so frustrated for our buyers. One is congrats on your Series A, or like congrats on whatever round of funding it is. And the other signal is congrats on your recent promotion. Those are the two that I see used most often. And they give the same vibe as seeing that you're doing personalization, but really you're just saying, I see that you're the job title at company. You're not saying anything that matters to them. You're not saying anything that's really relevant to them. You're just sort of reading the news back to them. And our job, some of the most important work that we can do as sales professionals is help them connect the dots so that they can understand that we have some expertise to share, that we understand what is relevant to them, we understand what problems they're working on, and we then have an opportunity to shift from very like product-centric messaging to very problem-centric messaging much more easily. Yeah, and then I'm seeing, recent funding. Somebody got it straight away. Yeah, Anja, that's exactly right. It's like the recent funding or the new promotion or new job are so common. And then I see this note from James, which is so true, that like it's often just AI pulling from the profile, which is an important call out, because I think using this type of territory management strategy where you are the CEO of your territory, you are building these deeply segmented lists so that you can give yourself an opportunity to say, hey, based on this niche group of folks that I'm going to reach out to, what is most relevant to them? What are the biggest problems that they are trying to solve for? What are the biggest opportunities that they are trying to seize? And then you can write messaging that actually earns their attention, earns their time, earns their consideration, instead of just doing that spam the TAM approach where you set your AI up, set up and forget it, and they pull these super, super generic, either like lazy personalization pieces, like I see you're the job title at X, or the most basic signals out, but you are just reading the news back to a prospect without telling them why it matters or what the context of that signal is within the problems that your product or solution solves. So that's a really great call out, James. Yes, thanks for that. Okay, so I gave an example here, and then I did want to save just like 5 minutes for questions. So if you do have some specific questions, make sure that you are getting those in the chat right now. But here's an example of how this might look all tied together. So if you have this like value-based segment stack, you're using a couple of filters here, a couple of those firmographic filters like industry, and then we went even a little bit deeper to segment to sector for pet products within CPG. You're using the geo and the revenue firmographic filters, so easily accessible filters. Everybody should be able to access this. You're using a demographic filter here, job title, again, that should be a pretty easy one. So far, all super, super easy stuff that we should be able to build within our CRM. And then the signal that you might use if you are a packaging and labeling vendor is recently announced FDA pet food regulations. And so this is now giving you the opportunity to not write a product-centric message about the features of your, packaging or the features of your labeling, or, even like that's most emails are just like very feature heavy emails. If we're being honest, I email like hundreds, probably thousands of them a year, and like 80% are very product focused on features. Some of them might talk about generic advantages like saving time and saving money, but we want to stop sending emails like that because they do not earn the attention. They do not earn the time, the consideration of our prospects. And instead, when you stack together filters and a signal like I'm showing you in this example, it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, what are the impacts of this signal on this particular persona in this specific type of account? And now I can write problem-centric messaging to help them better understand how this signal will impact them. And of course, the messaging, it's informative, but like your product or solution is ultimately the answer to that. But it's such an important pivot. And really the only way that I've seen folks successfully and continually tap into this type of relevant messaging where they can do it not having to like write one-off messages to every single prospect is by taking a more strategic approach to their territory. Relevance, relevance, relevance. We should have had a ticker up so that every time I said relevant or relevance, we were telemarking it. So we knew how many times I was saying it throughout the session. Okay. So I have to include this meme in every single deck I do because it's my favorite one. And the message I am driving home, folks, is that without relevance, you will be small dog sitting in fire room. Relevance is what our prospects demand of us in 2025, almost 2026. Gulp. If you are not taking the time to craft messaging, to craft sequences that focus on what matters most to your buyer, you are simply not doing enough to earn the right to their time and attention. And when we think about that quantity versus quality paradigm, nobody, at least nobody I know, nobody that would say it out loud, wants to be the quantity seller that is out there spamming their TAM, sending those generic spray and pray messages, because that type of sales outreach, it doesn't work. It also damages the entire profession of sales. It's what makes buyers hate us. So nobody wants to be that type of seller. Instead, we can use some of the techniques that we used today. So a couple items on your to-do list, leaving this, and then I'm going to be able to answer some questions, but a couple items on your to-do list. One, pick one of those segmentation strategies, personal passion, CRM data, or firmographic and other filters, and build a list, build that hyper segmented list. Remember that if you are trying to talk to everybody, you are talking to nobody. So use that hyper segmented list to ask yourself questions like, what is most relevant? What is most pressing for these folks that would make them want to talk to me today? Where are those opportunities to win today? And then, maybe most important of all, use that work you've done to build the list, to build the great messaging that is hyper relevant, because relevance is the path to tapping into personalization at scale. But really, relevance is it is the only way to earn the attention of our prospects right now, at a time where outbound is not easy, but it's also not hard because the bar is very, very low. So a couple of little tips for you. Yes, hashtag relevance. That's right, Mike. Hashtag relevance. Okay. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for letting me run this deck with you. It was fun to build something custom for this Revolt event. And it was fun to get to roll it out for the first time with all of you. So I appreciate you being so active in the comments. If you want to deep dive, like I said, we built 3 different kind of huge concepts. Each of them is their own chapter. I peppered them into one 40-minute presentation. So if you want to deep dive any of those, get the book, and it's part of a bigger, 9-step proven formula. So don't forget to, to look at the whole formula. But let's answer a few questions in my last couple of minutes. Okay, what do we have here? Let's see. Question from Sinir. How to use AI without looking creepy and make the approach unique. I love that, Sinir. Great question. So my favorite ways to use AI, one is to help build a list, particularly if you are at the point where you can pull in some of those signals and use them really effectively. Like if we go back to that slide on, the one that had the FDA pet food regulations, a fun way to use ChatGPT for that would be hey, these new regulations just got rolled out. Can you please help me understand what industries will be most impacted? Okay, within those industries, can you, I sell to the operations group. Can you help me understand how a COO might be looking at these new regulations differently than a director of operations? And so I think it's an incredible tool to both help us build our lists, but also help us better understand what's going on with those personas, because most of us, I think, are selling to a persona for a job we've never actually done. So favorite ways to use AI are like I think there was a session about clay right before this, right? So using some of those tools to help build really great, really niche lists faster, using AI to expedite our research or to help us do better research to understand our accounts and our personas better. I love doing that. And I use AI to support my sales messaging. I have quite a few custom projects and custom GPTs built with all of my own frameworks in them. But even then, I would say it gets me about 60% of the way there. And then I still put a human touch on all of the messaging to make sure that it's not game changer. Because no matter how many times I forbid chat from using game changer, they still try to sneak it in sometimes. So those are a few of my favorites. Will you get the presentation slides? Adrian, I think so. I would guess maybe Jared somebody can drop in the chat if we're going to get the presentation slides, but if not, DM me and I can send you a copy of the deck. Let's see, here's a question from Parth. What to do when I don't have a signal for the accounts after I am done reaching out to all the accounts that do have a signal? So it sounds like you're doing some signal-based outreach, but you've kind of exhausted relevant signals and now you're okay, who else do I go after? Honestly, I would further dig into my CRM data just to see if there's anything I missed in terms of asking that question, like who's most likely to buy now, renew, etc. Just to make sure there's nothing that you missed. And then I would go to the personal passion one. And maybe there is a signal that's something you haven't thought about. Like I use the example being passionate about sustainability. And so I went and found folks that had won sustainability awards, and then I wasn't reaching out and saying, hey, I see you won a sustainability award. Instead, I was asking myself a question like, okay, if they've won the sustainability award, it means they are making choices that are different than other organizations. Or maybe there's some sort of like CEO mandate that is driving this. Like, what is going on in organizations that have won this award that relates to the problems that my product or service solves? So I would revert to that one, Parth. And we're right at 1 minute. And I think I need to hand it back over to my host to like, get the thing to take me off the screen. This was so great though, team.
The
Thank you
big
for
hook.
being so active. Yeah, really appreciate you.
Yeah, great. I mean, great session. I had DMs flying through Slack at me. Relevance, you're rocking it. You crushed it, Leslie. Thank you so much for being here today. Guys, thank you guys all for being here today, and I'll see you on the next session. Hello, everybody. Starting to see more folks pile in here. 18, 19, 20. We're getting them. We're getting them, guys. Hope everything's been super swell thus far. I've personally watched every one we've had today, and they've all been, really fantastic. And I've been really, really happy and blessed to be a part of all this. Hope you guys have been too. Just a couple more minutes here. We had some technical difficulties on the back end. Those are being figured out. Feel free to jot in the chat some things that you guys have gotten out of today's sessions thus far. We've got a really cool one coming up. You guessed it, all around the age of AI. So stand on by for this amazing session as we wait for folks to keep trickling in and these technical difficulties to find their way out the door. All right, so looks like we are good to potentially go here. So back again. Hi, everybody. Once again, I'm Mike Cubberly from RevGenius. I also am the founder and CEO of Bottle Rocket Growth. This next session is called Selling in the Age of AI, and it's a big one. AI isn't just influencing the way we sell, but it's actually completely redefining it, as we all know. And today, we're joined by three of the industry leaders who are making this entire evolution happen, and they're hands-on in it. Anne, Kristen, Sam, together, they'll show how AI is reshaping prospecting, personalization, enablement, and how Rev teams can adapt fast. I'll let you guys take it from here, but I'll be jumping your links, your LinkedIn links into the chat. So feel free to get everyone connected. Enjoy the session, everybody.
And I'm Jared. This group of three is special. They put up with even in the age of AI, there's a lot of human stuff. And thank you